Hey, you should have already listened to my first video attached to this post, which was kind of like the basic instructions for our pick a podcast assignment. It's pretty broad and wide open. If you haven't listened to that yet, go check out that really brief recording first, and then you'll start tracking down a podcast that interests you and give it a view or a listen today. Now, for this video, I'm just giving you some examples. I've been listening to podcasts for a few years. I firmly believe that no matter what you're into, what your hobbies are, or, extracurriculars you might pursue, or whatever makes you tick, there is a podcast out there for everybody. And I know a lot of us get really busy and we don't have time to sit and to listen to stuff. But one of the things I like about podcasts is I'm a busy guy too. I often feel like I don't have time to sit down and actually read a book. But while I'm doing stuff around the house, doing the laundry, walking my dogs, I can listen to a podcast and kind of do two things at once. Now, for this one, giving you some examples. Now, you might be interested in something that I'm not going to list off here. For sure, you go do some exploring on your own and pick one that you think would be valuable and worth your time and on a topic that interests you. But here are some of them that I've listened to, which some of you might have similar interest to me. That might be why some of you took this class, because you got along with me in U.S. history or a previous course and you're interested in you're kind of like-minded with me. So my all-around probably favorite one, which can only be found on Spotify now, is the Joe Rogan Experience. Now, I don't listen to all the episodes on that. That's also probably worldwide, like the most famous podcast that I think gets the most views, where he gets on most episodes, something in the 4 to 8 million views or listens per episode. You can make a Spotify account for free if you don't already have like a subscription. You would just have to listen to some commercials then with the free account. Now, he is really big like UFC commentator, so he gets a lot of fighters on there. Usually I don't listen to those ones. He also is a stand-up comedian, so he gets a lot of stand-up comics on there and profiles them and gives them a boost to their career. I listen to some of those, but the ones I'm most interested in are probably about a third to half of the podcast that he does. He'll get a scientist, a politician, just people from all different walks of life that are maybe an expert or have done something remarkable. And those ones I find fascinating, because the vast majority of those, it's somebody I've never heard of before, and I never know what they're going to get into. Or sometimes it's like somebody that I know really well, and he gets them on there for an interview. And unlike seeing them on CNN or Fox News, where they get a 7-minute little chunk to talk and everybody's yelling and fighting, and then they got to cut to commercial break, I like this because it's a slower pace and they can sit and talk, and he'll do a very like long form discussion where they can really get into whatever it is they want to talk about. So Rogan's a pretty darn good one if you just like different stuff. And you could go scroll through the last month or two and just find a guest. If you read the or the description on it, find one that interests you. Now, next topic. If you're into like politics, I got rid of cable a while ago. I don't really watch any cable or network news. I kind of been fed up with that and just have tuned out of it. However, I still am really into politics, and I like to hear what's going on both sides. I consider myself like an independent, where I'm not really on either team, Republican or Democrat, and I like to hear what both sides are saying. So if you're interested in a political type podcast, if you want a right-wing, more conservative take, I would say any of the guys from the Daily Wire. Ben Shapiro is the main one. That's like the fastest growing conservative podcast out there. He's a real fast talker. Good take on conservative, spin on like conservative news, and it's spun in a conservative way. Another guy that podcasts with him is Matt Walsh. He kind of is like an angry, maybe semi-angry, snarky, sarcastic, average American dad. He kind of gives a take like that. I kind of like him. He makes me chuckle sometimes. Also, Dennis Prager. Now, he's not Daily Wire, but he's just a guy that runs his own podcast and does like fireside chats. Prager's pretty interesting. And who else? Sorry, I'm blanking. I thought I had one more there. But those guys are all pretty good. Dave Rubin is another one that's kind of conservative. Now, Megyn Kelly, she's more independent, but kind of leans conservative. She has some really good, interesting interviews on controversial topics too. If you're looking for a more liberal take, kind of the left-wing Democrat side, I would recommend checking out it's called Crooked Media is the name of their company, kind of a counterpart to like the conservative Daily Wire. So Crooked Media, the biggest one they have is Pod Save America. It's four guys that were Obama advisors and speechwriters. They get on and they kind of cover everything with more of a liberal spin. Also, another one I like who's a comedian where he just has a weekly show, but he also releases it as a podcast is a guy named Bill Maher. Pretty interesting. I think he's funny. He gives a funny take and spin with more of a, generally has more liberal guests and stuff on his show. And then there was one more that I'm going to, there's also, along with the Crooked Media Group, there is Pod Save the People, DeRay McKesson. He is a black guy that he'll get into more of like kind of all the racial tensions going on in the country. He's interesting too, very articulate, well-spoken. So that would give you kind of both sides of the political spectrum. If you're into like outdoorsmanship and hunting, one of my favorite ones there, and there's a whole lot of different options, but I really like the Meat Eater podcast with Steve Rinella. He is a guy that was born here in Michigan. I don't think he lives here anymore, but he basically is like a professional hunter and big time outdoorsman. He is also very articulate, well spoken, and gives a really good take on all things that kind of pertain to hunting. Those would be some of the bigger ones that I have so far. Let me think here real quick. Okay. Another one that, now this is probably my all-time favorite one, although I'll say like I listen to the Rogan one a little bit more because he releases multiple episodes a week, but all-time the best podcast I've ever listened to, and this would be any of you that are kind of like me and are history buffs and enjoy hearing stories about history. There's a guy named Dan Carlin that does hardcore history. Boy, does a good job. He has a great voice. He really breaks down like awesome snippets and chunks of history in a really common sense and engaging kind of way. So again, his podcast is Hardcore History. Most of his episodes are fairly long. I highly recommend him. If you like history at all, he's the guy for you. Everybody that would kind of consider themselves a history buff should definitely listen to his podcast and check it out at some point, because I can't express enough how I enthusiastically give Dan Carlin his Hardcore History show 2 thumbs up. There's also a site called Wondery where they release a bunch of different ones, but they have a lot of different podcasts with like kind of history content on them. There's a guy named Jocko Willink who is a retired Navy SEAL. He's all about like personal responsibility, taking extreme ownership. I had actually used him in like a TED Talk or something earlier in the year. Some of his have a very like military history type theme, but others are just kind of about the world and commentary. Anyway, Jocko, he is a guy that doesn't really go on either political side, although sometimes he will talk about political type stuff. But I really respect his opinion and think he's a super interesting guy too. Okay, and also we had recently just hit and finished up our religion unit. Now, I'll have to be honest, I don't listen to a lot of religious podcasts. As I had told you guys, I consider myself open-minded, and I also think of myself as an agnostic, where I don't really believe the existence of God can be proven or disproven. Maybe for that reason, I don't listen to a lot of like different religious podcasts where they're like preaching at you. However, there is a plethora of them out there. Whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or Hindu or Buddhist, any of those major religions all have numerous people out there that are doing podcasts that would tie into religion. If you're looking at it, wanted to get something from kind of a philosophical standpoint, but from an atheist take, I would highly recommend Sam Harris's podcast. I believe it's called Waking Up. I haven't listened to that one in a while, but he is a super articulate, very intelligent guy, but an atheist, and he kind of gives the case against religion often, or a take, from an atheist perspective. So that hit quite a few different ones. Hopefully there's something that I laid out there that maybe would give you something to go on. But then again, if you are, say you're maybe really into sports, I'm not that into sports anymore. I've kind of tuned out to like the NFL and Major League Baseball and stuff like that. However, there's a million different sports podcasts out there. So if you are into sports, great for you. Maybe go track one down, find some really good sports, commentary, and check out one there. Also, I don't really listen to these a whole lot, but I know some of the other top rated podcasts out there in the world they do stories. There's ones out there that are kind of like creepy, like paranormal activity type stories. There's others that are like murder mysteries. They're essentially almost like audiobooks out there. And there's some of those that are, I guess, outstanding and very well done, although I haven't personally listened to any of those yet. So that gives you some stuff to go on. But you don't have to take my advice. Go out there and explore for yourself and just find something that interests you that you would want to profile. And I'll have those assignment instructions, like exactly what I need from you as far as your podcast like review after listening to it. I will get that all posted on Tuesday. All right. Take care. Have fun exploring.